Hi, everyone. Welcome to the live session with the wonderful Phillip Wylie, who's going to tell us about pen testing. So he was teaching this course, which became a presentation, and he just mentioned that he's going to be writing a book as well.
Who's going to tell us about pen testing?
Yeah, a very famous approach that he has.
So over to you, Philippe, so that
Okay.
you can tell us more about you and please take over the presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, first of all, for inviting me. This is an honor to be speaking to your group. And as mentioned, this presentation came out of my first lecture of the semester for my pen testing class, my ethical hacking class. And the things that changed with it is I added information on learning resources, whereas in my class, people were learning so I could share some things and it really wasn't as important. But as this became a conference talk, I added some learning resources and those will be shared too. So you can start your journey as a penetration tester. And so I'm a principal pen tester, or was at a bank. I'm recently accepted a job with another company as the red team lead. I'm an adjunct professor at Richland College. I teach ethical hacking and web app pen testing, and I'm also a bug crowd ambassador and the 2019 Ambassador of the Year. I actually got into being an ambassador as a way to teach others, because I got into teaching as a way to extend the mentoring I was doing and helping people get into pen testing. So being a bug crowd ambassador was a way for me to find more people to reach out to help become pen testers or bug hunters. I'm a founder of the Pwn School Project, which is an educational meetup. And what we teach is mainly topics on pen testing and ethical hacking. I've been in IT and InfoSec for a little over 22 years now. Six plus years was spent as a system administrator. And this is kind of important to see the breakdown, because the background you need to be a pen tester, the knowledge you need to know. And 8 years was network security and AppSec. AppSec is where I got interested in pen testing. I learned about vulnerability scanners, the OWASP top 10. So this was really what got me interested in being a pen tester. And I've been pen testing for a little over 7.5 years, and my first 5 years were consulting. And if you ever get the chance to do consulting, I would highly recommend it, because you get to learn at a more rapid pace. Whereas if you're working for a company as a pen tester, then you're going to be testing the same systems year after year, whereas being a pen tester, you're going to different client sites on a weekly or monthly basis. And also, when you're getting started out as a pen tester, make sure whatever you're testing against, even if you're just trying to learn, make sure you have written permission, because otherwise it's illegal to hack without permission. And be careful whenever you do side projects. Be careful, make sure you have written permission. Make sure it's a legitimate company, because there are times that people would try to find someone with hacking skills to hack people for the wrong reasons. So be very careful with that. And some good ways to get practice is CTFs, labs, and bug bounties. So with a bug bounty, you're actually practicing in a live production environment. So what is pen testing? Pen testing is assessing security from an adversarial perspective, attempting to exploit vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access to systems and sensitive data, also known as hacking. Being in the security community, I really try to teach students to know the difference between a hacker. Not all hackers are bad. So I'll refer to them as malicious actors or malicious hackers. Our black hat hackers. That way you don't want to, if you're getting into the field, there's a lot of good people to learn from, and you don't want to offend people coming into it. So it's good to know the difference. And why pen testing? You're able to test from an adversarial perspective. You could do other ways to assess systems, but you don't get as good of an understanding if you don't add pen testing to the mix. It gives you a better understanding of the risk severity. Something that's exploitable is a higher risk, and this gives it a higher priority for remediation and justification for budgeting, because sometimes fixing these problems can be expensive. And so if it's something that's higher risk or exploitable, then it's going to be more of a priority to remediate. And it's kind of interesting during some of the pen tests I've done before in the past, especially one in particular, it was for a large international law firm. And for years, the chief security officer has been saying, we need to get this fixed and this fixed, and they wouldn't listen to him. It's not always that companies don't trust their internal resources. Sometimes they can't afford it. Sometimes sometimes it requires a third party, like a consulting company, to finally prove to them that it needs to be remediated. So we were able to find things for that security officer that he could pass on to finally get remediated. So knowing if it's exploitable that it can be hacked into is more reason to budget for the remediation. And it's always important to remediate after you find these findings, because what might be low risk now, someone might be able to just write an exploit for it, weeks or months later, and then all of a sudden it's a higher risk. So it's important to remediate all the findings. And why pen testing? Regulatory compliance is a big one for the payment card industry DSS standard. One of the companies I work for, mostly what drove our pen testing was for PCI compliance. It's a fun job. If you like challenges, if you like puzzles and that kind of stuff, then this may be a job for you. There's a lot of opportunities. When I got started a little over 7.5 years ago, mainly consultants and contractors were doing pen testing. And so the need for it grew so much that a lot of companies had to hire their own internal pen testers, because sometimes it's too expensive to pay, consultants or contractors to do pen tests. So a lot of companies, a lot of banks have their own pen test groups, and it's growing over as time goes on. More and more companies are adding their own penetration test teams. In pen testing jobs, when you're looking for jobs, these are some of the things. The professional term is penetration tester or pen tester for short. Sometimes if you're talking to people outside of technology, or maybe even someone in IT, penetration testers, they may not understand, or pen testers. So a lot of times you'll refer to it as ethical hackers. When you're looking for jobs, you may not see pen tester as the title, but security consultants, analysts, and engineers are typically terms that are used. You just have to look at the job descriptions. So as we mentioned already, ethical hacking is synonymous for pen testing. Also offensive security, you hear a lot. Adversarial security. Threat and vulnerability management is also a department that a lot of times pen testing is done in. One of the companies I worked in consulting, the group I worked in was the threat and vulnerability management team. So kind of understanding these when you start looking for a job makes it a little easier. Like I said, go through, look at the job descriptions, look at the tools. Sometimes in the description, if it's a pen test job, it will mention penetration testing, ethical hacking, and then some of the tools that are used in pen testing. And skills in other areas that pen testing is useful. Security Operations Center, SOC analyst, understanding malicious traffic is very helpful. Digital forensics and incident response. If you're doing incident response against a breach, then understanding the attacks can make it easier for you to investigate. Network security analysts and engineers, understanding that traffic just like the SOC analyst, and then understand how to protect against it. Once you see how certain attacks work, it just kind of gives you better ammunition to remediate, to prevent those type of attacks. In purple teams, where it's the defensive and offensive security is combined, they're working together, you're doing both sides. And that's a really good way to learn in security, if you can learn both sides. Some of the best defenders understand pen testing, and some of the best pen testers understand the blue team side, the defense side. And then application security is another area that this is useful in. As I mentioned earlier, this is how I found out about pen testing and got interested in it. So these skills are helpful, just knowing the knowledge of attacks. Even if you're in management, it's easier to explain to upper management and the business groups on why you need certain technologies to protect against attacks. And types of pen test targets. So one of the most common you see will be network. network. And includes the internal network, external network trying to get in from the outside from the internet, and then wireless networks. Wireless is very important because an attacker could drive up in your parking lot or from a mile away, hack into your system, and then no one would even know, where they're located. And application, this is a very popular one here, very important, because as networks get more secure, as more advanced endpoint protections, firewalls, and intrusion prevention devices come out, the harder it is to get into these networks. And so sometimes the only way to get in is your wireless networks, your web applications or mobile apps and cloud. So these areas are very, very popular areas and good areas to get into. If you have a background in development, then application security may be a good place to start. And then hardware hacking, the network devices, routers and switches. IoT is a big thing, especially because as IoT originally came out, there was a lot of insecurities. Some passwords were hard coded into the firmware and were unable to be changed. So that way an attacker can get in that way. Medical devices, this is a really important one here, like pacemakers and insulin pumps. When I was consulting, I did a wireless pen test for a hospital chain, and it was interesting to see the medical devices connected to that network. So if a malicious actor got on that network, they could cause a denial of service against a medical device, which could be used to keep someone alive or keep someone healthy. So this is a very important area. And a lot of devices, when they first come out, people don't think about security. They build the device, they get it out there, and then later on they find out, oh yeah, I should have secured it. And that's the case with a lot of the insulin pumps and pacemakers, because there's a couple different, several different brands of those that have been found to be vulnerable to being exploited. And then transportation, all types of vehicles, air, buses, trucks, automobiles. And this is getting more important as the autonomous vehicles, the self-driving vehicles come out. We need to make sure these are secure, because these could be weaponized. So that someone take control over a bus, they could wreck it or, and use it as a weapon. So we need to make sure these are secure. And this is even above securing data. This is, protecting lives. So this is very important. People are another target. Whenever all else fails, you can't get in through the network, the applications, then hacking the people, trying to social engineer someone to get a password, to click on a malicious file. This is what, one of the areas that attackers will test. So pen testers do this. And that's like one area that a lot of people will specialize in, just doing nothing but social engineering. I don't know if any of you've heard of Jason Street. He's someone that specializes in social engineering. And so this is a very important area. And in some of the more realistic hacker movies, you see where they're using social engineering, and even like on Mr. Robot. And then buildings, your physical security. Sometimes social engineering is used in this. Sometimes people clone badges or tailgate inside. You can have everything secure, but if someone can get physical access, it's a lot easier for someone to hack into a system. So that's why this is very important. And you can specialize in all of these. In different areas of this, you can specialize, or you can do a little bit of both, be more of a generalist. And so I'd recommend when you're getting started out, unless you have heavy experience in application or network, then I would try a little bit of all of it to see which area you like best. And maybe that's an area you wanted to specialize in. When I was getting started out, for about a year, I was doing just web app. And at the time, I kind of missed the network pen testing. So I went to work for another company so I could do more of a variety. But as you're in the field for a while, you may get to the point where you've done enough different things that you may want to specialize. In types of pen test knowledge, so when you're testing, trying to hack into a device, the information you have on that device can affect the time it takes to test it and the ease that you're able to get into the system or test the system. The first one we'll discuss here is black box testing. This is like limited to target IP address, maybe a URL if it's the application test. But this is more of an attacker approach. And these are important because you can see what an attacker can do with limited knowledge, what an attacker can find out about your company on the internet. I did a test, a freelance pen test last December, and it was a black box or red teaming simulation, because we had the physical location of the company because they wanted us to test the physical security, and we knew the name, so we had no IP addresses, domain names, or anything like that to test. So we had to do a lot of reconnaissance to find out IP addresses and domain names to test it. And one of the interesting things, using reconnaissance tools like Shodan, I was able to find a FTP server because this FTP server wasn't in the same range of IP addresses, but due to the FTP header, Shodan was pulling it up. When I searched on their company name, it found the name in an FTP header of a system. So a black box test requires a lot more reconnaissance, a lot more collecting of information on that system, and this generally takes more time. And white box, also referred to as crystal box testing, is the opposite end of the spectrum. Using on applications, you have accounts, and with application testing, you really want to have accounts because you want to make sure that a normal level user that's just enough, or supposed to have enough permissions just to run the application, can't get access to admin level functions. And even at the same time, even the admin doesn't need account details. So it's best to test with every level account in that system and make sure you can't escalate privileges from a lower level user and so forth. And white box test allows you to test more thoroughly. Some people that are more purists to the adversarial attack mindset will say this is not a true pen test, but it actually is. If you've got little time, you need more information on it. And also, the main goal is to make sure the system is secure. So the more information, the more you can test, the better you're going to find the vulnerabilities and ways to remediate. Because there may be a system you're trying to hack into, you may not be able to hack into it, but maybe once you're on the system, you can do certain things. And according to some of the stats that there used to be several years ago, anywhere from like 65 to 85%, somewhere in that range, they claim of the attacks are internal resources. So a lot of cases, this is someone that has an account on that system. So you want to test that too. And then the gray box is more common. This is partial knowledge of the target. This is kind of a combination of black box and white box. So you have IP addresses, URLs, domains, and this information. And your scope is a little more defined than a black box pen test. And so this is what you do most of the time. Most of my pen tests have been gray box pen tests. And during the application, more white box testing. And here's like the different levels of testing. And some of these are functions on their own. A lot of companies will have a vulnerability scanning team. So their job is to run scans against the servers and workstations and different hosts in the environment to test the security, to look for vulnerabilities, to see what needs to be patched, make sure patches are being applied and so forth. And like I said, this is like usually a specific department. And then you come into your vulnerability assessments, and the vulnerability assessment is taking the vulnerability scans a step further. What you're doing this is, after your vulnerability scan, you're validating the vulnerabilities. You're running other tools or manual techniques to make sure it's not a false positive. Because although these tools are great for finding vulnerabilities, sometimes they may find false positives. So you want to make sure you rule out the false positives. And as a pen tester, you will do dedicated vulnerability assessments because sometimes customers or the people you work for may be worried if you hack into something, it could cause an outage. And so the next level up is pen testing. So you're doing those first two steps. You've scanned the system, you found the vulnerabilities, you've ruled out the false positives. Now you go in and look at those vulnerabilities and see if they're exploitable. And exploitation is also referred to as hacking. And exploits are hacks. And so you get like the red team, the adversarial testing. This one's kind of interesting in the fact that most people, when they hear red team, people can consider defense, blue team, and then offense, red team. But more true professional description of it is you're testing the blue team, you're testing the defenses and the controls. You're making sure that whenever a system's being attacked, that the SOC analysts are seeing these attacks and they're reporting it to the incident response team. So it's testing the steps and the blue team. And that's one of the best ways to describe it that I've heard was testing the blue team. So like this is more of an adversarial, more of the way a hacker would do things. And so in these cases, sometimes you have a little more time. Whereas you're doing a pen test, people are notified to let them know that the pen test is happening. With red team tests, then usually it's certain upper management and security doesn't know about it because they're testing the reaction and making sure what they have in place works. So those can be kind of fun. Red team also entails like more social engineering and physical pen testing, trying to get into the building. And so specializations. So most pen testers are generalists. So they'll do network testing, Wi-Fi, and light web app. Even if you're not going to specialize in web app, as a generalist pen tester, you're going to run across some web applications on your network that you're testing. And this sometimes is the only way to get into the system. So you'll need at least enough area, understand that area to be a generalist. And then application, you're specialized in web apps, mobile apps, thick client and cloud applications. And then social engineering, a lot of people will specialize in this, such as like Jason Street. And social engineering, you're attacking people, as we discussed before. And then physical is testing buildings. And this also can be used or done a lot in social engineering and red teaming. And then transportation, your vehicles, airplanes. And then red teaming is the adversarial simulation. And kind of a progression someone would probably, that you would see in pen testing, is if you didn't have application background, you would probably start out as a generalist and then possibly move into red teaming later on. And if you have an experience with application, then you may stick with that area, or you could do more, you could move into doing network pen testing as well too. But the red team is kind of, I would say now, where pen testing probably was about 7 years ago. It's not like a new concept, but more and more people realizing that type of testing is required. And red team, a lot of times, although pen testing will do this too, and social engineering will run phishing campaigns. So these are probably one of the more popular red team type tests that you see is the phishing campaigns. And how to become a pen tester. So to become a pen tester, you need to understand the technology, and you also need to understand the security, because if you want, it makes it a lot more difficult if you don't know the technology to break into that system. And so what you need is you need to understand networking, operating systems, especially Windows and Linux, and you need to know those from like a sysadmin level. You need to understand how to do things from the command line, because a lot of times as a pen tester, you may just get a shell or a command line to a system. You don't have the Windows GUI or the Linux GUI to do things with, so you have to understand that command line. So that's why it's important to understand that and have kind of like an admin level, sysadmin level knowledge of that. And then security, you need to understand the security and the security controls, how to bypass them, and look for the security weaknesses to bypass. And understanding applications is also good, especially web app, and then hardware, understanding hardware. And from hardware, this is not necessarily has to be IoT. This is understanding how servers work. One of the things I recommend, if you haven't, is to build a computer, build your own computer or server to understand how that works. Because when I started out as a sysadmin. And before I got into being a sysadmin, I taught myself how to build computers. And then I took a network operating system course. So understanding hardware is important, and how hardware connects to the system, how you set up networking with the network cards. And hacking knowledge. Once you understand technology and the security of systems, then you need to learn how to hack. When I got into pen testing, I was working application security. I'd run web app vulnerability scanners and some network vulnerability scanners, but the thing I was missing was hacking. I got a job as a pen tester, and I knew I needed to learn how to hack. So I took the offensive security pen testing course, the OSCP, to learn how to hack. So you can get this knowledge from classes, conferences, meetings, and meetups such as this. self-study. I recommend everyone has a home lab. There's a lot of good videos on YouTube on how to hack. There's a lot of tutorials on different blogs, and you can find these through Twitter, and also different blogs and articles on the internet. There's some really good resources out there on that. And so the hacking piece is very important, and a bigger learning curve for most people. That was probably the hardest thing for me to learn. But the more you prepare before you get to that phase, the easier it becomes. The more you understand the technology of what you're trying to hack, the easier it is for you to hack into that system. And one of the things you have to develop along the way is the hacker mindset. The interesting thing about pen testing and the hacker mindset is it's not only analytical, it's also creative. You have to have creativity to figure out how you can chain together these different exploits, these different hacks to get to sensitive information, to get root access to a Linux or Unix system, or to get NT system authority, administrator, or domain admin to Windows systems. And so the best way to develop this is through repetition and hands-on experience. It's kind of like troubleshooting. If you have any experience with troubleshooting, you remember when you learned how to install something, then you tried to troubleshoot, that was a little more difficult. And as you worked with troubleshooting for a while, then you knew if you weren't connecting to the network, then you knew to check the physical layer to make sure your network cable's plugged in or you're connected to the Wi-Fi. And so that's pretty similar to the hacker mindset, learning how to hack. And just the more you do it, the more you learn it. I know some really good hackers that are so good at this, they know a lot of exploits right offhand that they'll think of. Okay, this is Linux. They know to try dirty cow or something like that. So the more you understand that, the more you know the exploits, the better you'll be. And here's my formula for becoming a pen tester: is technology knowledge plus security knowledge plus the hacker mindset. So hopefully if you're attending this webinar, you've already started out, you're on some level of this journey already. So I would say most cases is probably down to starting to learn how to hack and do pen testing. And so where do you start? So you're developing a plan where we need to fill in the gaps. You need to do a gap analysis on your current skill set. So if you have no IT experience, no technology experience, this could be no help desk or whatever, then you need to start with the basics, learn operating systems, hardware, and networking. And a good way to do this at a low cost is there's a website called professormesser.com. And he has free YouTube videos on the A+ certification, Network Plus certification, and Security Plus. So you can go through these. You don't necessarily have to take the exams to get the certifications, but just go through and learn that. So that's a good way to start learning those basics. And if you work in IT or security somewhere, make sure if you don't know Linux, learn Linux. Security and networking, these are very important. And InfoSec experience. If you're at this level where you're already working in InfoSec, fill in the gaps, any of the basics you're missing. Some people who work in security may not work with Linux, so work with Linux and start learning penetration testing and ethical hacking. Participate in CTFs, capture the flags, and bug bounties. And everyone, no matter what level on, you need to build a lab. I've been in IT and security for over 22 years, and I have a home lab. Home labs are also good even as you're working as a pen tester. You can try out exploits in your home lab before you try it in a production environment. One of the things with exploits, sometimes if you're not careful, you can accidentally take down systems. So if you're running an exploit against the system, then there may be a chance you could either cause a denial of service, it could reboot the system, or shut it down altogether, or you could damage the operating system or one of the applications on the system where it has to be reinstalled. So it's a good idea to test those first in a home lab. And it's a lot of times you're testing something that's also referred to as a POC or proof of concept. So you have an environment to test those in. And so here's some of the different lab options. My favorite is the minimalist lab, because the minimalist lab, you've got your laptop or your computer running VirtualBox or VMware, and you're running purposely vulnerable VMs on there that you can actually attack against. And some of you, since you're OWASP members, you've probably heard of Juice Shop and some of the other purposely vulnerable applications. So with your minimalist lab, you've got these targets on there, and you can have a VM. You can either attack from your host OS with pen testing tools there, or you can have like a separate Kali Linux VM to attack the systems with. And then you get into your dedicated labs. So you can have one system with all your vulnerable VMs on it, and you can attack from your computer to that system. And then you can get into advanced labs. This is having separate, it doesn't have to be server grade servers, but you can have computers set up as servers, client computers, and you can have routers and switches. If you don't have experience in those areas, it's good to learn routing and switching. And there's even firewall software like pfSense that you can set up your network and get more complex. But I would say starting out, the minimalist route is the best way to go, because anytime you're building a lab, you're going to run into hardware issues, and you can spend the majority of your time trying to troubleshoot getting those things running, or maybe something breaks and you have to repair it. So the minimalist lab is a good option. A nice thing with the minimalist lab is sometimes you're at home studying, you get bored and you need to change the scenery. You need to still study, but you need to change the scenery, and you want to go to Starbucks or somewhere. So then you can just take your laptop with you and go study there. And your attack platform. This is the operating system or the computer you're going to be attacking from, performing your pen testing from. And Kali Linux is my main recommendation because it comes with all the pen testing tools, or at least they're in the repositories. There'll be like a base number of tools installed. And if you need to install more, Kali Linux has a repository on the internet that you can download these tools readily and install them. If you use something like Ubuntu, Arch Linux, or Red Hat, or Mint Linux on your own, install those. Sometimes getting the dependencies to get it to work, sometimes it's hard to do. Sometimes it's you just, I've had occasions where I was trying to install something on Ubuntu and I just couldn't get it to work. But with Kali Linux or Parrot OS, they're set up for pen testing, and so it's easy to get these tools installed. Parrot OS is a little bit newer one, but I've heard a lot of people like that. They say there's a little more security. So if you're running it on your system directly and not in a VM, then you may be able to secure your system a little bit better if you're on a network somewhere. And then Ubuntu, there's a script called the Pen Tester Framework by TrustedSec. And you can install these scripts, and it installs all the pen testing tools on Ubuntu. So as I was talking about keeping your system more secure while you're doing pen tests, you're out somewhere doing CTFs, then something like this would be more secure, like the Parrot OS. And then for Windows, if you're interested in Windows, and I recommend setting this up too, is FireEye has a set of scripts similar to the pen test framework, but it's for Windows, and it's called Commando VM. And you can install this on Windows. I would recommend installing on Windows 10. And the nice thing about this, compared to trying to set up hacker tools or pen testing tools on Windows on your own, if you don't set up your operating system correctly, then whenever you install hacker tools, then Windows Defender will try to delete it. So the operating system will try to remove any kind of malware. And with the Commando VM scripts, it sets up like a sandbox. It sets the security up so your tools won't be deleted. So if you're wanting to run on Windows, that's a good option. And really at one time, Windows is probably the more widely used tool. And then Backtrack Linux came along, which is the predecessor to Kali Linux. They renamed it Kali Linux years later as they improved the system. But it's kind of good. Whenever I was pen testing, I would have a Windows VM as well as a Kali Linux VM. That way I could test in either one. And that the VM route works out well, because if you're doing a dual boot system and you've got like your Commando VM, you're working in Windows and you need to go over to Kali Linux and do something, then you'll have to wait for whatever scans you're doing to complete to reboot, or either have two separate systems. So that's one of the reasons I like to operate in VMs. And also with your using VMs, if you're performing a pen test, you can have like a base image that you keep updated and save that VM. And each time you just copy the VM on a pen test, that way you're done, you can just delete that VM, because you may have customer data that you don't want to get contaminated with other customer data. You really don't want to be carrying that around after the pen test is complete. So you can each time use a new VM of your main gold standard VM that you're using, and do that. So that's what a lot of testers will do. And so now we got our attack platform. We need our targets. So you can create vulnerable machine targets using vulnhub.com. Vulnhub.com's got a lot of good vulnerable VMs on there. And some of these are images that were used at CTFs at conferences. And so you really want to get more towards the hacking type stuff and less towards CTF specific. Some CTFs can be more of a security challenges and not necessarily hacking. So trying to learn pen testing, you want to stick with the VMs that are more related to hacking. And some really good pre-built VMs is Metasploitable 2 and 3. This is actually built by Rapid7, the creators of Metasploit. And they have purposely vulnerable VMs on there. You can go through, and a nice thing about these VMs is there's a lot of different vulnerabilities on one system. So it doesn't take up a lot of disk space. So you can install 1 or 2 VMs and you've got a lot of different vulnerabilities to test against. And then you have the OWASP WebGoat VMs. And those are really good for web app pen testing. And then you can create your own targets using vulnerable software from ExploitDB. So you can go out there and look for different types of vulnerabilities and look for the vulnerable software and then set that up in your own home lab. But starting out is easier to download the VMs that are already purposely vulnerable. And so recommended reading starting out as a pen tester, I recommend Georgia Weidman's book, Penetration Testing, A Hands-On Introduction to Hacking. This is a real good one. She's actually working on an update, although it has Windows XP on here, and some people complain about labs with Windows XP. Hacking is hacking, and so wherever you learn, if you learn on XP, that's fine. And you still run to Windows XP on pen tests. The little side pen test I did last December, one of the systems that allowed me to hack in and get on their network was a Windows XP system. So I would start out with that book and then progress to the Hacker's Playbook 2 and 3. Version 3 gets more into red teaming. So if you're interested in red teaming, then I would get version 3 as well. And Web Application Hacker's Handbook, probably a lot of you all have heard of this book, but this is really good for web app pen testing. And you want to make sure you get the second edition of that book. And then the Red Team Field Manual is a really good guide. It has syntax on for the different tools and different operating systems. So it's a really small, lightweight, really handy resource that can save you time, have to look things up on the internet. And also along the lines of study, and I think one of the resources is listed here, is Portswigger, the creators of Burp Suite, which actually one of the creators is the writer of the Web Application Hacker's Handbook. Instead of updating this book online, if you go to Portswigger, I think it's portswigger.net, they have their Web Application Security Academy, and it covers different vulnerabilities from the OWASP top 10, and it tells you the details on there. You read through that. It's online training, and then it's got a lab for each one of those vulnerabilities to practice exploiting it. And so that's a really great resource there. And some more learning resources. There's a space right here in the middle. This is separating the paid from the free learning resources. SANS is really good, but SANS, unless you have an employer paying for it, or you just if you got a bonus and you can afford to take the training, it's good. But SANS training is going up to like $7,200 the first and next year. eLearn Security is less expensive and is really good training. I took their web application pen testing course and their mobile pen testing course when I was just getting started. And the thing I like about eLearn Security is they give you a lot of detail. So it's really good for someone just getting started. I mean, some pen testing courses expect you to have a little experience, or maybe the people writing it don't write it to people, just starting out. Virtual Hacking Labs is a really good one if you're wanting to go the OSCP route. This one is nice because they have training for the labs that you can do before you start in the labs. And once you get into the lab environment, They have all sorts of systems ranging from Windows, Linux, and actually even an Android device that you can hack. And the nice thing about this one is they actually give you hints. So the easier to hack targets, they will tell you the operating system. They'll give you different tips to try to hack into it. And as it gets more difficult, the advanced servers does not give you hints. So as you start out, they kind of, train you along, and then they expect once you get to a certain level that you've learned, and you're testing, the systems on your own without the help. I mean, you can Google and that sort of thing, but that's really the way you want to get. And that's like one of the courses, like Offensive Securities OSCP course. That's a really great course and certification, but you really need some experience with pen testing before starting it. And they give you no hints. If you go onto their message board or their IRC channel, they don't give you hints. And the good thing is it's forcing you to learn. If you can ask someone for the answers and you always have that there, it's going to keep you from learning. But they really go to the extreme on that. So they really force you to learn. And the OSCP, I probably learned more from that certification than several certifications combined. In Pen Tester Lab, if you're into web app pen testing and that's the area you really like, Pen Tester Lab is good because the focus of it is web app pen testing. And they go beyond finding cross-site scripting. They go to taking any of those vulnerabilities and try to exploit it to get access to data or to get command line access to a system. That's a really good one, and it's relatively affordable. And they usually run a Black Friday special right after Thanksgiving, so you can get some good deals on that. And out of these, probably the most cost-effective one is Practical Pen Test Labs. I signed up for this last year, and I think it was like $64 for lifetime access. So you get a short pen testing course, and then you have some vulnerable systems that you can hack. And kind of overlooked Pen Tester Academy. This is a really good one. It's like $39 a month, and they cover web application, Wi-Fi hacking, reverse engineering, Active Directory hacking. It's a pretty awesome value, because on top of that, you get like labs, and I think they're like over 1,000 labs now. And there's like training materials for each section. So there's training videos and exercises to perform. And then you can move on to the labs and practice what you learn. So that's a really good one. I highly recommend. And I actually have, out of these last three, Pen Tester Academy, Pen Tester Lab, and Practical Pen Test Labs, I have subscriptions to all three of those. And then Bug Crowd University, they have some really good learning materials on there. There's some excellent materials on how to use Burp Suite and how to test for certain vulnerabilities from the OWASP Top 10. And the SANS Pen Testing blog, they have a lot of cheat sheets and stuff on how to use different pen testing tools. And then hackingtutorials.org is a great site. This was created by Virtual Hacking Labs, and it's tutorials on how to use different pen testing tools. So this is completely free and has a lot of good information. And then cyberA.it, they have a lot of good free content. There's some pen testing courses on there, and the advanced pen testing course was created by Georgia Weidman, that created the pen testing book that I recommend. And back when I used that for my textbook for my ethical hacking class, we used to use the videos in class for the students for each chapter related to the book. Then there was a video for that. So they would go through the videos as well. So that's a really good course to go through there. And as I mentioned, Portswigger's Web Security Academy, this one right here. This one's really good for web app pen testing. It's totally free and great quality. And then the OWASP website, because you've got the OWASP testing guide. And then if you're going to be a pen tester, you really need to understand the OWASP Top 10. So getting there, digging through and reading the OWASP Top 10 will help a lot. And if you're ever going through pen test interviews, interviews to be a pen tester, then they're always going to cover the OWASP Top 10. Those are the vulnerabilities that are routinely asked about during our interview. And then hackthebox.eu. This is a good resource. Try to find the systems that are more related to hacking and less CTF. You can learn from the CTFs, but as you try to hone your skills to be a pen tester, you need more hacking related resources. And there's some good charts out there on servers that are similar to the ones in the OSCP. And then over the wire CTF, War Games, this is a really good online CTF. And these are less of the puzzle type. It's more hacking, and you can learn a lot about Linux and Unix security from those. I highly recommend those. And then if you go to the hackermaker.com/learning-resources, I've got these URLs on there. So if you're seeing this, you don't have to worry about taking a picture or whatever, or a screenshot. You can go back and there's the link to there, and the URLs are there, so you can actually access the URL and not have to try to type that out. That makes it a little easier. But these are all really good, these are really good resources. And it's good as you go through different courses, then you'll pick up different things. So maybe you took a CEH course somewhere, and then as you take another pen test course, or the more you study the different, after you see it multiple times, it tends to make more sense. And sometimes people explain it different in a way that you get it more than someone else. And then the hands-on experience, just hands-on is really what helps me. If I can do it myself, you know, with my own hands, then it's easier for me to remember something opposed to just reading or watching, you know, or watching a video. And here's some certifications. So the entry-level certifications are the CEH by EC Council. That one's pretty popular with HR and management. It's a DoD cert, so it's very popular for anyone doing work with the government. The Pen Test Plus is a newer one. It came out last year. It's by CompTIA. And out of the two, it's kind of the one I recommend because they go real heavy into methodology, which is really good. You need to understand the methodology and not just the tools. And I really like the way CompTIA writes their materials. So if you've been through like Security Plus, they touch a little bit on pen testing and vulnerability assessments. So as you go through your journey, if you start out with CompTIA, and as you go through like Network Plus, Security Plus, you start learning more about security. So they build on each other. And that's why I like the Pen Test Plus. And other CompTIA certs are DoD certs. And I think eventually Pen Test Plus will probably become one of those. And then your intermediate certs. These are the ones that are that people that are hiring pen testers will usually look for, either someone with a GPen, which is a SANS cert, or the OSCP. The OSCP actually has a lab. So there's systems you have to hack into to prove that you can do it. Whereas some of the other certs like GPen, they ask you questions about tools and that's good. They're testing your knowledge, but the OSCP tests your skills. And I've got jobs based on having the OSCP because some companies would have an actual lab that you have to use for the interview. They would give you a vulnerable VM and a Kali Linux VM, and they tell you go in there, hack, see what you can do. And so my second pen test job, since I had the OSCP, they said, well, he's been to the OSCP. He's proved he knows how to hack and do pen testing. So that was very helpful. And then the advanced level is your GXPN. This is the advanced pen testing and exploit development course by SANS. And then the OSCE is a similar course, but back again to the hands-on, the offensive security is known for. You actually have to build exploits and stuff and do advanced pen testing in there to get that cert. So these are all really good, and these are all in level of difficulty. So the CEH and Pen Test Plus are gonna be easier. Sometimes it's good to get your foot in the door. I see a lot of companies even looking for security people, and this goes to show where the pen test knowledge is useful. Is I've seen companies that were hiring security engineers or analysts, and they wanted like a CEH. So that goes to show that knowledge is helpful. But there are some entry-level pen test jobs that'll look for those as well. But the main thing is, even though you get certifications, make sure you know how to do pen testing. Make sure you know how to hack, because you can have the certification and you get in for the interview and you can't answer certain questions, then it's going to make it more difficult to get through the interview. So you need to know it. So a person that really knows the subject will have a better time on an interview than someone that with a lot of certifications that really doesn't know what they're doing. So job tips, professional networking, get involved in your community, do some of the meetup groups and clubs and conferences. These are great ways to network. There's a lot of people out there willing to help. So people can help you get jobs. My last 3 full-time jobs have been through some of the local meetups that I'm a member of. And the thing, I've got 3 jobs, and that's not really counting the other referrals that people have offered me trying to recruit me. So that's just 3 of the jobs I accepted through my connections in the community. LinkedIn is good. Keep it professional. That's your online resume. Keep that up to date, because recruiters will come through there looking, and if they're looking for someone your skills match, then you're not even have to actually be pursuing a job. The recruiters will be pursuing you. And then interview tips. The best interviews I've ever had are the ones that I've prepared for. And just about every pen test interview I've gone through, I've always been asked something about the OWASP top 10. So understand the OWASP top 10, especially your SQL injection, your cross-site scripting, know the different types and how to remediate those vulnerabilities, and be able to understand the basic stuff to like networking, like the 3-way TCP handshake and the OSI model. Typically managers will ask you this stuff because maybe they've been removed from the pen testing for a while, and they'll ask you more of the general basic IT related questions. So make sure you prepare up front. Like one of the best interviews I had in my career, I just got the Cisco CCNA certification, and the job combined was doing servers and network equipment, routers and switches. And unfortunately, I just took the CCNA exam and passed it and went through a course, and I knew enough about those topics that I can answer questions on it. So always, when you're ready to start interviewing, make sure you're preparing. Be prepared, because there's some things that may be easy, it, and then you get away from it for a while and you forget. So just make sure you prepare for the interview. Be prepared and you'll do a lot better. And here is my contact information for anyone interested in contacting me. I really enjoy mentoring people. That's how I got into this. So feel free to email me, connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. And if anyone has any questions, we can now open that up to questions.
Thank you so much, really. That was a wonderful session. And so in the chat, we have Nancy who says, thank you for sharing all the resources.
Yeah, really a lot of good information, and from an expert, this says a lot. And I'm really looking forward to your book.
Oh, thank you.
Great. So let me just check if we have more questions.
Okay.
So we don't have any questions at the moment in the chat box. So if there will be any questions, we will redirect to you, and we have your contact information. People can reach out to you. It was really, really a wonderful and meaningful session.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Great. Yeah, really awesome. Excellent.
And
God.
I'm looking forward to meeting you.
Yeah, same here. Hopefully that'll happen in 2020. So
yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, wish you the same. We'll see you again. Yeah.
See you soon.
Bye. Looking forward. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.